Hi everyone, welcome to this MediaCom event around inclusion and diversity. I'm Nancy Langthorne, Head of Inclusion and Belonging for MediaCom and WPP, and I'm going to be one of the people walking you through the session today. Before we start, I just want to say if you would like captions on, you will see a little CC symbol that's on the bottom right of your screen, so click on there and you'll be able to turn on captions. Just before we started, I got told how many people had accepted this event, which is always a little bit terrifying, but brilliant to hear that so many people are engaged. But I think it also probably speaks to how much work we all know that we have to do in this area, and that's why we're holding this event today. So I really want to kick off by explaining why we're holding the event and why we've chosen this approach and format, because I think that context is important for setting the tone. And to be really blunt, I think some of us are really frustrated at the pace of change in our industry. And I think often we go to events around inclusion that look brilliant on paper, but we come away from those events feeling that not very much tangible was said. I think as an industry, we're brilliant at fielding panels of people who can talk about how important inclusion is. And I think there's real consensus there, but we don't often hear from people who've done the work, who can talk really specifically about what they've put in place and how they've specifically tackled a problem. And I think that's baffling personally, because I think, this is a business problem and we don't talk about other business problems in such an intangible way. And today we really want to try and change that narrative. One of the first moves that we did to try and tackle that narrative was to make MediaCom an open book on all matters of inclusion, and we did that last year. So we've committed to sharing all of our work, good or bad. We feel that can really help to speed things up for the industry if we share our learnings and talk about how, what's been successful and what hasn't. And I think for too long, diversity has been seen as something that is a USP for an organisation, and we've kept things to ourselves. And we decided really last year that if we kept also doing that we were part of the problem. So we've made that commitment to opening everything up. We've spoken to lots of organisations already about the work that we've done, and we've shared aspects of that work. And today is about widening those conversations even further. And so I really hope that the people listening on the call today hear issues that they also share. Maybe hear the opportunity for us all to be working more closely on this, and it'd be great to hear from you afterwards if there is an opportunity to do that. We don't profess to have nailed this area, so just because we're holding this session does not mean we are perfect. We absolutely are not, and like everyone on the call, we've got so much work that we need to get done. But we did start this journey some years ago, and so we're a little bit further ahead in some areas, and therefore we think we have to be accountable about that, and we need to share what we've done. The aim of today is that everyone comes away from this session with at least one idea that makes them think, okay, I can take that back to my business and I could probably even start working on that this week. So we are, for once, actively encouraging people to copy work, pinch ideas. That's the whole point of today, because our industry has to become more inclusive and we have to do it more quickly than we are doing now. Primarily, we're going to hear from four people today. So we've got MediaCom CEO Kate Rowlinson, who's going to talk us through the work we've done at MediaCom around microaggressions and allyship. And that's been a difficult subject to tackle, but we thought it was really important to lean into that discomfort, and she's going to talk us through that. Inclusion consultant Lydia Amar, who we've worked with really closely, will be urging us all not to ignore the experience of our Black colleagues, and she'll be explaining how avoiding cultural issues doesn't make them go away. And so again, that's something that all of us need to really lean into. We're very lucky today to be hearing from Sky's Debbie Klein about the bold and very public targets that Sky have put in place. And for me, crucially, she's going to talk about how those targets can be communicated to existing staff to A, make sure everyone gets on board, and B, to help safeguard those in marginalised groups. Targets, I think, is an area that is something that makes lots of people nervous. So, it's amazing that Debbie will be able to talk us through that. And then finally, we're hearing from Avalon Thompson, who's our inclusion manager here at MediaCom. We've put in place a sponsorship programme. Av is going to talk us through the details of that and talk about how that is our solution, part of the solution to making sure that the really good diversity we have in our junior and mid ranks, that's how we can make sure they transcend through to sort of management and leadership positions. We really want you to quiz us today on this work. This is about learning and being tangible, and so your questions are really vital part of that process. Claire Ferguson, our head of comms, will be joining us after the talks, and she'll be taking us through a Q&A. So please use the chat to ask any questions, as many as you'd like, as bold and as blunt as you like. And if we don't get through everything today, I promise we will follow up on all of those questions so that you get clarity. Final point from me, this is an unashamedly MediaCom heavy session today, and there's a reason for that. You know, the role modelling and the sort of sharing aspect of this, we have to do it in that way. We didn't want to encourage everyone to be open and then hold back ourselves, so we had to put our money where our mouth is on that front. So today there are a couple of MediaCom speakers. We would love this to be the first of many conversations in this area, so please, if you're listening and think, actually I have a brilliant piece of work that I'd love to bring to a wider audience, then it would be great to hear from you afterwards. So watch this space for more events in the future. So on to our first speaker, Kate Rowlinson. Kate has been in the MediaCom business for over 10 years, but became our UK CEO in 2019. And from an inclusion perspective, what a time to become CEO. We've already been through a lot. But Kate's really pushed us to take a very bold approach in our work, and I think that's been an amazing thing for MediaCom. It's really enabled us to deliver a step change. And so Kate's going to talk you through some of those more innovative areas now. So over to Kate.
Thank you, Nancy, and hi everybody. You're very welcome today. Thank you so much for joining our event. And I'm going to talk about, well, we talk about diversity and inclusion for a reason. Yeah, so at MediaCom we place equal importance on both of these things. So a major pillar of our strategy is diversity, which is about the right representation in our teams, making sure that our teams represent the city in which we operate at every level in the team. I'm not going to talk about this strand of our strategy today, but I'm really looking forward to hearing from Debbie Klein today, who will talk through how Sky have set ambitious targets in this area and made very public commitments in doing so. But what I'm going to focus on today is the inclusion part of our strategy. And really the ultimate goal here is that everyone in MediaCom, irrespective of their gender, race, ethnicity, age, sexuality, or social background, feels that they truly belong in our company and can bring their full selves to work every single day. And I think, you know, we really do believe that there is little point in creating a diverse workforce if the culture in which our people operate doesn't accommodate, celebrate and support that diversity. And I want everyone in MediaCom to feel that they belong. And at MediaCom, we've always over-invested in our culture. People first, better results is a founding principle for us, and belonging is a key aspect of our culture. So when I became CEO at the end of 2019, I spent a lot of time with Nancy in order to really understand the challenges we face in becoming more diverse and inclusive. And, you know, we're good on data. I think we know what we have and where we are. We also have a good read now on how included people feel in our culture via the WPP Belonging Survey. But how do we get better? And how do we make our culture even more inclusive? And one of the things that Nancy and I discussed in the context of culture was microaggressions. And I have to say, it wasn't a term I was overly familiar with at the time. But as a woman, I have, of course, experienced microaggressions in my life. And for those who don't know what a microaggression is a brief and commonplace daily verbal, behavioural or environmental indignity, whether intentional or unintentional, that communicates hostile, derogatory or negative attitudes towards stigmatised or culturally marginalised groups. And common examples are touching a black person's hair without their permission, asking somebody, where are you from? No, where are you really from? Or using the term gay or girl in a derogatory way to symbolise weakness. And sadly, the list goes on. And it's really shocking to me to think that microaggressions happen at all, let alone in our workplaces, but they do. And in the WPP Belonging Survey, MediaCom UK was voted by its staff as having one of the most inclusive cultures in the whole of WPP. Now that's good, but how can we be better? So we're not perfect. Who is really? And we know that microaggressions happen in our business. So I think as leaders, we have a choice. We can face into that fact and take action, or we can shy away from it and hope that it resolves itself. And I don't believe the latter is an option or likely to succeed. So I really wanted to lean into this difficult topic of microaggressions. But what should we do about it? Because really there are no easy answers to this question, but what we decided to do as an important first step was to raise awareness of microaggressions, acknowledge that they happen in our business, shine a light on them, on what they are and the impact that they have on people, and importantly, talk about the importance of allyship and how we all need to be better allies to each other, especially when we see or hear microaggressions happening. And I think we often meet microaggressions with silence. So they make us uncomfortable. People don't want to, they don't really know what to do or say if they see one or hear one. So we decided that we wouldn't be silent and we would lean into the discomfort, as Nancy just said, try to change things. So Nancy and the team worked with our brilliant ERGs, our employee resource groups, to gather examples of microaggressions which they or people they know within Mediacom had experienced. And we used these examples to create a film, which we played to the whole company across all of our offices in the UK, which is about 1,500 people, in a company-wide town hall in July last year. And the intention was to raise awareness of microaggressions and to launch our Mediacom allyship programme. And we were already in the process of making this film when George Floyd was horrifically murdered by a police officer on May the 25th last year. And this event and the ensuing momentum behind the Black Lives Matter movement just spurred us on really to finish it. So can we play the film, please?
Okay, so you want me to read this? I was in the lift a few months ago before lockdown. I was wearing my hair naturally that day, not straight like I sometimes have it, and someone I don't really know very well leant over and started running their fingers through it.
We asked people from around Mediacom to read out quotes based on real experiences of other people at Mediacom.
Each one is an example of a microaggression.
In most cases, this is the first time they've seen the quote they are reading.
It was suggested I tone down my accent before presenting in a client meeting.
I was told I didn't look like a John. I look more like a Winston.
Oh, I can't read. I'm totally dyslexic today. Not great to hear when you are, in fact, dyslexic.
When someone from my team heard I was Jewish, they joked that I must be rich and well connected.
I think someone thought they were being helpful when they suggested I don't hang around in a group with other black men. They said we can look intimidating when we're all together.
Of course I get the "where are you from" question, followed by "no, where are you really from?"
It was just before a client meeting. I was already quite nervous about presenting, and a colleague suggested, if you want to make a good impression, you should probably wear more makeup.
Often people don't get my name right. Correcting people all the time feels futile. It's a losing battle.
That's so gay is used as an insult so often. It's not great to hear when you are actually gay.
You hear this sometimes. All of you millennials are such snowflakes. You have no resilience.
Anyone can experience microaggressions based on factors such as age, sexuality, ethnicity, disability, social class, faith, and gender.
At Mediacom, we always strive to put people first. And sure enough, in the 2020 Belonging Survey, we were judged by you to be one of the most inclusive workplaces in our industry. but there is more to do. It's important that we respect each other, that we stand up for each other, and that everyone feels free to be themselves without judgment. Thank you.
So every time I watch that film, it makes me sad, but it also makes me certain that we did the right thing in making it. So the film launched our allyship programme. We made it mandatory for all of our people to attend microaggressions training, followed by allyship training across the summer last year. The microaggressions training was delivered by the brilliant and inspiring Bilal Khan. And Bilal, if you haven't met him or worked with him, is a facilitator who works with teams and companies to shine a light on microaggressions and their impact, and also helps companies to make positive change around inclusion. And after the Bilal session, our people also took part in a 2-hour allyship workshop, which looked to really equip our people with the confidence and the skills to be better allies to each other. So by the end of the summer, everyone in the company had completed both of those sessions. And I have to point out here the critical importance of employee resource groups. So our ERGs are the eyes and ears of minority or marginalised groups within our business. They are our first port of call for advice, and they were instrumental in the making of that film. So tackling and talking about microaggressions is a really important step for us in building a more inclusive culture at MediaCon. And I think with all of these things, it's a journey. We're on a journey, and I would say that we're at the beginning rather than the end of that journey, but we are speaking up. We are acknowledging that microaggressions happen and being very clear that we just do not tolerate them and that they are unacceptable in our culture. And we've made a really very clear statement about that to the whole company. So I hope you found this story useful. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm going to hand you back to Nancy. I'm really looking forward to hearing from Lydia next. Thank you.
Oh, I was on mute. It's the first time I've done it all year, and really, what a disappointing day to do it. Okay, thanks, Kate. I really love that phrase, sad but certain. I feel like you've just summed up a lot of my working day. I think that's, yeah, that really taps into a lot of the emotion that we feel when we start to uncover things that are people's truths. And then go forward to address them. And I think actually Lydia's going to help us understand that a little bit more actually. So just to intro Lydia, Lydia Amour is a cross-cultural and diversity consultant, recognised as a leading authority on diversity, cultural transformation and inclusive leadership. She's an award-winning business coach, a TV presenter and a campaigner who's helped thousands of people transform their lives and improve many businesses. Lydia's the pioneer of the Black Pound Report, which is research exploring the spending power of Black, Asian and multi-ethnic consumers, as well as being the architect of the Stop It Protocol, which is a new policy to protect employees from online and offline racism, hate crimes, which I have to flag is because of a very unpleasant experience that Lydia had after the killing of George Floyd on a very public meeting. So even in these times where we had a lot of support and desire to be more inclusive, we're still seeing these really awful incidents. So Lydia, talk us through your sort of priority areas, please. What can we learn from those cultural insights?
Okay, Nancy, thank you for the introduction, and thanks also for inviting me to be here today. I was thinking about this for such a long time, thinking I just better whittle it down to 3 key points to really support you. And, before I go into it, I want to ask everybody that's observing today, just to ask yourself this question. Are you ever in a situation where you just are tied up with what do I say next? You feel kind of like a little bit mute. What do you say next? And I'm witnessing this is happening in a lot of organisations at the moment. And I feel that's because and this is not to instill any fear, people feel as though they're that step away from a discrimination case because they're not saying the right thing. And Kate, you highlighted this earlier actually, and it's about culture. So I've got 3, so get your pens ready. So 3 key strategies that you can address to help you create more and more inclusive culture within your organisation. So the first one is this: what happens is many times when consultants like myself go into organisations to find out what's happening, we have a conversation and then people get really enthusiastic, which is really great. And then they go off, and what happens, I've witnessed this, they go off and create this diversity programme and they go and do it unaided. And then what happens is they haven't really tuned in and taken part and listened to the lived experiences of the people they most want to reach. So that's the culture. It's really important. And when you don't do that, what happens is it actually backfires and you go back to square one. And that's the worst place to start from when you put all that work and excitement in. And I know, again, people aren't always doing this from a place of malicious motivation. It's from a place of excitement but not really checking in. So number one is, if you write that down, is culture. Take a look at your culture. And what I mean by that, I mean the environment in your organisation. It's important to understand the lived experiences. Again, we listen to one part of it, microaggressions. There's so much more. So for many people, it can feel like a bit of a minefield, but yet you need to do due diligence. You can't really afford not to embrace and understand the lived experiences of the people you most want to connect with. So that's stage one. If you don't understand that, you'll alienate the people that maybe in the first place weren't feeling alienated, because you've gone off and been really excited and created this program without getting the right assistance in. So I'd say it's really important to take care of that. So the next stage I look at is, which I've recognised, is what I will call complaints. I've just made it really simple to say 3 C's. So the second C and the second stage is complaints. Now that's understanding the complaints of the people that you most want to reach. I hope that makes sense. So again, if you go off, imagine you go off really excited, not really understanding the culture, you make an amazing diversity program, really excited, you haven't consulted, understood the lived experiences of the people that are most feeling marginalised, isolated within your organisation. And then what happens is, underneath, you get ripples of complaints. People back in the day would meet, we're all working remotely now, people would meet and talk and discuss and say, do you know what, this is what happened to me today. And someone said, oh my gosh, is that true? But now we have a situation called whistleblowing. People are feeling isolated at home. They need someone to communicate with. People can sometimes take to have these online conversations online because they feel, who can I talk to? So they think if I put something out there, somebody will come back. And quite often that's what happens. You know, that's how we all get in tune with one another. So it's really important, if you get the culture right, you're going to have less complaints. So understand the lived experiences. Make sure that you're engaging with the people you most want to support and help. So I've noticed organisations can really shy away from the difficult conversations. There's sometimes I've written a report and someone said, that's just a bit too honest. Can we leave that bit out? And I feel, I mean, it happened to me just the other week. And I feel that, but if I don't express the truth to you as a business, then how will you change? I'm just papering over the cracks. And later on, what happens when you paper over cracks? It becomes wider and it becomes worse. And then you're left in a situation where it's so much worse. So we know that retention is a real challenge and a real problem within a lot of organisations, and especially around multi-ethnic staff. And so it's apparently by ACAS report, it's about £30,000 to £50,000 to replace talent. So get the, you know, that's an area you need to get right. And stage 3 is something that I call colour. I wonder if that makes sense when I say that. Basically, I'm talking about you have multi-ethnic employees within your organisation. Maybe let me paint a picture for you. This is just a picture. This is anybody. I'm just making this story up, but just to create a scenario for you. So you have a marketing executive, really talented, Afro-Caribbean background, and then you think, okay, well, let me demonstrate that this business, we are really inclusive here. And then all of a sudden they become your poster kid. They're everywhere, all over the place. I know, again, I've seen this, I've witnessed this. It's not delivered with malicious intent, but at the same time, all of a sudden, people within the organisations begin to ask questions and say, is this what we've got? Is this as far as we have come? Does that make sense? So colorism is quite close to racism, which, you know, a lot of organisations now are doing anti-racism workshops. I think you can type in a box and let me know if your organisation has rang up a consultant and said, can you help us with some anti-racism workshops? Now, all of these things, like I say, are really good, but just look at your journey and take your time and address those 3 C's. Look at your culture. Kate was highlighted that earlier on. I look forward to listening to what everybody else has got to say. Look at the complaints, listen to the complaints, understand the lived experiences. And again, what I call is colorism, racism, really, you know, and it can come off as racism. And there are cases of racism, as Nancy said, just around this time last year, the same thing happened to me online, you know. That's why the Stop It protocol was there. Somebody with a lived experience that went through something like that was able to inform and write policy. Some of the times we get given policy and we're not part of the actual story. So I just want you to think about 4 words that were recently said by Greg, by the FA chairman, Greg Clark. He said 4 words, and within 24 hours, you know, he had resigned. He said, high profile coloured people. And that was it. Within 24 hours, the man was gone. So I'm almost like thinking the next day, should I ring up and see if there's anything I can do to help with the culture, help with the culture? Because if the real work had been really done, then these things wouldn't be happening so often, you know. And many people, what I've noticed is many organisations go at this from a technical issue, and they don't really go from a human issue. And dare I say, can we take it even further back and take it back to a heart issue? Because if you're doing things because you feel that you just need to do it, but you're not connected here, and many people might think, what do you mean? How do I have to be connected when I come to work with my heart? Well, the problem is, if you do not, then these are the things that will happen. And just today in the news, the Telegraph revealed that Lloyd's figures came out about the disgruntled figures. Maybe most of you have seen that part of this week. Their culture survey came out. So I would love to be able to speak with all of you and share with you. You can reach out to us after all this, as Nancy said. We'd love to be able to support you and give you some top tips and highlight what's the most important thing within your organisation, within your teams, within your culture, that you could be that you could really value some support with, and we'd be more than happy to support you on that. So I hope that's really been of help for you today. So remember the 3 C's: culture, complaints, and colour. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lydia. I think it's tricky, isn't it, when you're in a leadership position, you quite often feel like you need to know all of the answers and that you need to be able to fix things, and that should be something that you can inherently do. And when we don't reach out to people to really understand what's going on, then we lose all of the important facts and nuances. We're going to move on to Debbie Klein now. Debbie joined Sky in 2018 as Group Chief Marketing and Corporate Affairs Officer, and has recently extended her remit to include people. She has responsibility for the overall brand and marketing development, as well as leading the corporate communications work, public affairs, internal comms, and Sky's corporate social responsibility programme and human resources. So we're not really sure when Debbie sleeps, but she must do. Prior to joining Sky, Debbie was Chief Executive for Europe and Asia Pacific at the Engine Group, an integrated marketing services business where she worked closely with Sky for 12 years. She held various leadership roles in her 20 years at the firm, including head of strategy, and early in her career she worked in strategy and insights at Saatchi & Saatchi and Nielsen. So we are really, I know we've said it before, we're really excited to have Debbie here, because she is going to talk about this thing that so many people worry about: targets. What does it mean? What does it mean if other people get upset about them? How do we get everyone comfortable with this topic? So over to you, Debbie. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks, Nancy. It's great to be here. Whilst I am here with my people hat on today, as you all know, I grew up in this industry and in the ad industry. So yeah, delighted to connect with the MediaCom team. And also there's so much to learn in this area. It's great to hear from the other speakers. So Thank you. I am going to talk about targets and how they fit into our overall diversity and inclusion strategy, but I wanted to talk about why target setting is important to me personally first, and it's really simply because I believe that as one of the leading businesses, as one of the leading companies in the UK, with the power of our voice that a brand like Sky has, we really should have a workforce that's representative of the communities that we live and work in. We're across the UK in different magnitudes, and we should represent our customers and communities as well. And currently we don't in every area, we do in some. And because we think that by being a more diverse and inclusive organisation, and I feel passionately that'll really unlock potential within the organisation and make Sky a better place to work and attract better talent. It's as simple as that. So before we get into targets, and I'm going to get quite detailed on that because it is a tough area and I really want to help people who are thinking of doing the same, I want to put them into the context of our overall D&I strategy. So if we could start with the first slide, and I'm just going to sort of overview, talk about our commitment. So we want Sky to be a diverse and inclusive place for people in an organisation which, as I said, truly reflects customers and communities. And that, you know, isn't just the right thing to do, it's also good for business, for our business, all businesses. It will enable us to make better business decisions. It will enable us to develop better content on screen, to be more innovative. And, you know, quite simply, when people feel included and valued, they're more likely to stay with us, and we're all in the war for the best talent. But it's playing our role in society, and doing the right thing is a massively important part of that. So driven by an informed culture, stronger representation, which I'm going to talk about, and ultimately working towards a fairer society where for everyone. And the commitment that we made last summer, the £13 million over 3 years, to help tackle racial injustice in the wake of the George Floyd killing across all our markets, we committed to really do 3 things. First was to improve Black, Asian and minority ethnic representation, which is what today's about. The second was to make a difference in communities impacted by racism. And the third was to use the power of our voice and platform to highlight racial injustice. And all of that's in addition to the gender equality commitments that we already made in 2015. So if we move to the next slide, this is our diversity and inclusion strategy. It's got 4 pillars. The first is representation. The second is progression. The third is culture. And the last is using our voice. So I'm obviously going to talk in some detail about representation, which is about making our workforce representative. But in addition to target setting, we are doing things like early careers content academy, how we actually bring people in and have the most representative workforce at the junior levels, particularly in content, because that's where we can really make a difference. We've changed our recruitment process. We've got an inclusive recruitment guide. Happy to share that with anyone who would like to see it, but I'm not going to talk about it in detail today. And also looking in new pools of talent, because we realise that largely when recruitment is about speed, people tend to not have diverse shortlists. So we've totally changed all of that. And the second area is about progression, ensuring all our colleagues have got the right opportunity to reach their fullest potential. Kate talked about that. Our hiring processes, and then some targeted programs around people, particularly in the middle levels of Sky, that really were feeling stuck. Black and minority ethnic colleagues who felt that, you know, for some reason they weren't able to progress at the same rate as their white colleagues. On culture, that's about we have a phrase that we use that is about making D&I part of our DNA. And we've done a number of things there. I won't have a chance to go into any of them in detail, but just to paint the picture, we have a diversity action group, which is 12 colleagues, representatives from across the business, who meet monthly with myself and Stephen Van Rooyen, who chairs the group, to give us ideas, to hear feedback. We have a diversity advisory council, which is 7 people, external people who advise us from across sectors and industries who've got experience in D&I and in certain to really hold us to account. We had a meeting with them yesterday, which was terrific. We have our employee networks who we've consulted throughout all of this targets journey. I'll talk about that at the end. And we have a Unity program, which is a speaker program where we get fantastic outside speakers, which the whole of Sky across all our countries are encouraged to tune in. And we have, in the last 3 weeks, brought in Denise Peart, who's in my team, a Chief Talent, Diversity and Inclusion Officer. The point I wanted to make about that is by putting talent together with D&I. We're really having the D&I lens across all talent conversations now. And then the final is about using our voice and ensuring that this thinking is at the heart of everything we do on and off screen. So we have just launched the Kick It Out partnership, which is partnering to end racism in sport, which is a 3-year partnership, highlighting racial injustice on screen and putting content out there to make sure that people are educating themselves and are aware, and making a difference in communities. We will be working with community organisations and charities. The Kick It Out is the first of a number that we will be announcing. So if anyone hasn't yet written their D&I strategy, I highly recommend that they're going to do, you'd be hard to do better than the first 3 pillars: representation, progression and culture. Not everyone has a using their voice pillar, because we obviously have our platform, which is phenomenally powerful, but those first 3 things are really important in everything which our organisation is doing. So I'm now going to move on to talk specifically about targets, now that you've got the context of that, and we can stop sharing the slides. So when we thought about setting targets, the reason that we decided to do this is in the day-to-day running of our business. For example, you know, we have had gender targets for quite some time. That's how we work as a business. We chase targets. We have targets for sales. We have targets for commercials. We are a targets-based business, and it's no difference with this setting. That is our thinking, is that we feel that by setting targets, it puts a stake in the ground and it sends the whole organisation heading towards that. We've done it very publicly, deliberately, because we want our leaders to really be held to account. We want people to really feel that they are in it and they have a role to play in delivering on them. So whilst targets don't always influence behaviour, culture, as we've heard a number of times, is important too. They've been a really important totemic statement which we made in January. So we've used a data-driven approach. I'll show you a video, an example which unpacks all of this, but we've essentially taken each department and we've looked at the level of staff churn normally. We've looked at what the usual representation of that community is ethnically, using the Office of National Statistics, the ONS data, and looking at attrition, looking at data, and then we've aggregated that and said, right, you know, if in London, where there's obviously a greater Black and ethnic minority population, we will have higher targets. Scotland, where we have a huge workforce, the targets will be slightly different, but those all add up to 20 and 5 by 2025, which is 20% Black, Asian, minority, ethnic, and within that 5% Black. We're working to fulfill that through a combination of recruitment activity and retention and progression, and I'll talk about that after you've seen the video. But really important that people understand how we got to them, and that in each department now, people can say, because the video I'm about to show you will show you the aggregate targets and how we got there. Now in each team, Sky Sports, Sky Mobile, Sky Broadband, you know, my HR team, my corporate affairs team, everyone has their own individual targets, and then within leadership we have a specific target as well. So I'm going to pause there and actually show the video because it is so explanatory and helpful. It does go on for about 4 minutes, but I think it is the best way of telling the story. So let's show that.
Hello, let's talk openly. We want Sky to be a fair and representative place to work, where everyone has an equal opportunity to succeed and progress. An inclusive culture where our people can be themselves, irrespective of race, gender, sexual orientation, disability, age, or background in life. This isn't just the right thing to do, it's good for our business. If we can break the barriers that are holding some groups back, we'll make better business decisions, develop better content on screen, and more innovation off screen. Everyone will benefit. That's why we've set ethnicity targets of 20 and 5 by the end of 2025. 20% Black, Asian and minority ethnic representation, 5% Black representation across our business in the UK and Ireland. We want Sky to better reflect the communities in which we live and work, so we've looked at our locations across the UK and Ireland and compared them to the ethnicity makeup of those individual regions. Alongside other Sky data, such as recruitment and attrition, we've developed a target for each of our departments, which ladder up to our overall target of 20 and 5 by 2025. So why should we set targets? Well, without them,
I think we're just going to start that again because
to better reflect the communities in which.
Just going to try again.
Hello, let's talk openly. We want Sky to be a fair and representative place to work, where everyone has an equal opportunity to succeed and progress. An inclusive culture where our people can be themselves, irrespective of race, gender, sexual orientation, disability, age, or background in life. This isn't just the right thing to do, it's good for our business. If we can break the barriers that are holding some groups back, we'll make better business decisions, develop better content on screen, and more innovation off screen. Everyone will benefit. That's why we've set ethnicity targets of 20 and 5 by the end of 2025. 20% Black, Asian and minority ethnic representation, 5% Black representation across our business in the UK and Ireland. We want Sky to better reflect the communities in which we live and work, so we've looked at our locations across the UK and Ireland and compared them to the ethnicity makeup of those individual regions. Alongside other Sky data, such as recruitment and attrition, we've developed a target for each of our departments, which ladder up to our overall target of 20 and 5 by 2025. So why should we set targets? Well, without them, we wouldn't have anything to aim for. Also, targets help influence our behaviours, and we want to channel this in a positive way. This isn't about positive discrimination or recruitment quotas. It's about championing equal opportunities and creating the conditions for positive, long-lasting change. Let's take a look at where we are today. The national average shows that 3% of the UK population is Black, and it's the same at Sky. 13% of the UK population is of Black, Asian and minority ethnic origin, while at Sky, 15% of our people are from this group. However, this simple snapshot doesn't tell the full picture. In some regions, we don't currently reflect the communities in which we live and work, and we're a long way behind at leadership level. Sky is disproportionately based in Greater London and Scotland. 13% of Greater London's population is Black. However, within Sky's teams in London, we have 4% representation. 40% of Greater London's population are of Black, Asian and minority ethnic origin. Within Sky, we have 25% representation. In Scotland, less than 1% of the population is Black, and 4% are of Black, Asian and minority ethnic origin, and Sky's teams are in line with that. Each Sky department has a region-weighted target, reflective of its location and current ethnicity makeup. We recognise that we need to improve representation across our leadership roles too. Our leaders represent Sky as a whole, and we want them to role model the changes we're working to achieve. That's why our leadership targets will mirror the overall 20 and 5 target. To make this change happen, we all need to work together on new ways to recruit, retain, progress our people, and ensure our industry is more accessible to all. We must be clear on what this is and isn't. We will remove the barriers that prevent underrepresented groups from progressing, address bias within Sky, review how and where we recruit. We won't use quotas, promote tokenism, use positive discrimination, hiring or promoting a person because they tick a diversity box instead of their skills, experience and potential. We are proud of being awarded the UK's most inclusive employer in 2019. So, while we and businesses across the country have a long way to go, we have confidence that we can deliver. Our existing gender targets will remain in place, and we will continue to collaborate with our employee networks to ensure we better address underrepresentation in other groups too, including LGBT+ and disability. We want to ensure that everyone who works at Sky feels valued, respected and seen, that people feel empowered to promote an inclusive working environment. Each one of us can make a difference, and together we can drive positive change. Find out more on Today at Sky. Sky, believe in better.
Great, so that gives you an idea of how we've set the targets, and it's a fairly sophisticated methodology, because what we didn't want to do is say, oh well, if you look at the whole picture, we represent, the data is the same as the ONS data, because we wanted to be honest with ourselves, because we're disproportionately based in London, which has a higher Black ethnic minority population. We actually needed to increase much more there, and particularly amongst leadership. So it's a sophisticated methodology, but it's a very simple communication. And I think that with targets, one of the things you have to do is explain to people why you're doing it, because it's, you know, it's not universally accepted that targets are good. We've heard from Black colleagues, you know, I don't want to feel that I've got the job because I'm Black. So that is why we specifically said what we will and won't do. It will always be based on merit. People will not hire people just because of their ethnicity. Equally, we wanted to be sure that the organisation was going to, you know, have something to aim for. So we came down on the side of publishing, of being very externally very overt about it, of being perhaps more ambitious than what other companies would be, as has been our nature for many years. But we also want to encourage the right behaviour for the right reasons. So alongside this is working with people on how to make sure that they are recruiting in the right way, how decision making is held, how the pools, as I mentioned, the inclusive recruitment guide. So based on that approach, we've said to people, work out how that will be in your department. So if you are in a tech team, you're going to take a very different approach perhaps than to the legal team. And there are specific challenges. So you get into really quite a lot of detail working with industry leaders to say, well, you know, for example, in legal or in finance, where do we find this talent? We've also, and this is, you know, not everyone's done this, we've taken the view that it would be wrong for us just to act in Sky's interests rather than, you know, to grab market share of the amazing Black and ethnic minority talent, rather than building positive action. So if we just tee ourselves up to essentially primarily poach Black talent or ethnic minority talent from competitors, we're not actually working to fix the root causes. So a big part of that is a big part of this is about building the pipeline right from the bottom, but at the middle levels too. We also didn't want to pursue race targets at the expense of gender. So you could end up saying, well, we've hit our race targets, but we've got more men than women, and we've been working very hard on our gender targets for some time. So you have to look at the intersectionality and really work on that as well. And then longer term, what really matters to us, way far and beyond just hitting the numbers, is, you know, broad-based Black economic empowerment, a group in society that's been systematically underprivileged for the longest time. We as Sky feel that we've got an impact to make because of the number of people that we employ, 24,000 people in the UK, over 30,000 people across Europe. And then secondly, using this as a symbol and holding up if hopefully we're successful for the equality of other underrepresented groups, LGBTQ+, particularly in disability. We're looking to do a lot more in that area. So in approaching this, we've worked at a very micro level, but in communicating it, we've worked at quite a macro level. You may have seen we've had a campaign out there talking about, we've talked and we've listened, and now it's time for action. It's in The Economist this week. It features people from our diversity action group talking about why targets matter to them and why they've been part of that story. And in getting to the targets and in communicating them, we've had about 60 people across the business who have given specific feedback on the language, the communication and the numbers. That's from our employee networks, our Black at Sky group, our Women at Sky group, our diversity action group, who've said, actually, you've got this a bit wrong, you've got that a bit wrong. And the feedback we've had has been great from people. But I would finish by saying that what we've also heard loud and clear is, okay, so we've set those targets, we're out there, now let's make it count. So I would say that feedback from colleagues, and you know, last summer, like every organisation, we had some really difficult conversations with colleagues. Yeah, I don't think we realised that the experience of Black colleagues working at Sky, we were looking at what we were then calling BAME. We don't use that anymore, but when we spoke to Black colleagues, we realised the experience was very different. We realised we need to do specific things, and that setting the targets was really important for that group to hear. But, you know, okay, now let's make it happen. And as a Black colleague said to me, you know, Debbie, it's great that we've led this. It's great that we've out there and communicated it. Let's make it count, because we really can make a difference as a leading organisation, as a leading business, by setting it, and then also by reviewing that progress. So it's probably worth saying the leadership group, our group executive, we discuss D&I and how we're doing on all 4 pillars of the strategy every single week, and we will review progress against the targets regularly. And then it's very much a big topic of conversation. People want to talk about it and they want to know how we're doing, and it's enabling a lot of those difficult conversations. How are we going to reach those targets unless we make some difficult decisions? So I haven't had time to go into the inclusive recruitment and all of that. We can maybe get to that in Q&A, but I hope that that inspires anyone who's thinking about should they or shouldn't they. I can honestly tell you we've had a phenomenal response from our staff, but also externally from a lot of organisations, and would be happy to share more with you on the right way to do it. But that has, I hope, given you a little bit of inspiration for what your organisation could do as well.
Thank you, Debbie. That's brilliant. I'm sure it's more than a little inspiration. Sometimes you see somebody else's work and you feel really jealous and cross that you didn't come up with it, and your video is an example of that. I think it's so often people put targets in place and they feel a bit worried about them, so they don't communicate it and they don't talk about it. And so I think that's a challenge to all of us to be a bit more transparent there. We're going to move on to our final speaker before we get to that Q&A, and it is Mediacommer Avalon Thompson, who I work really closely with. Av has been at Mediacom since 2008 and is our future talent and D&I manager. She runs a number of our programs at Mediacom. She oversees our ERGs, our Mental Health Allies program, and is also a really pivotal figure in our sponsorship program, not just as somebody helping to run the program, but also as a sponsee. So she is very well placed to talk to us about that systemic intervention that we've put in place. So over to you, Av.
Thank you, Nancy. As Nancy said, I'm here to talk to you about our sponsorship program, one of the programs that we've implemented, one that I'm really, really excited about. So I'm glad to be able to share it with you today. Mediacom's Employee Belonging Survey has given us insights and data, which has allowed us to hone in on specific areas of need. One of the key insights we were able to gather was that underrepresented groups do not always feel that they are able to navigate their career based only on their own ability. Add to that the insights from the numerous cultural listening exercises that we have undertaken. We know that those who do not feel part of traditional networks feel that they are on the back foot. Quite honestly, our data tells us that if you don't play golf and if you can't spend your time networking in the pub, then there is a belief that you will not be able to flourish in this industry, and we can't challenge that view. We see it highlighted in the stats across the media sector. Women make up almost 60% of junior roles, but only 34% of C-suite positions. Only 6% of creators are over the age of 50. And only 4.7% of C-suite positions are held by Black and Asian or minority ethnic employees. Not numbers to be proud of, and we know we have a hell of a lot of work to do. At Mediacom, we have good representation of minoritised groups within our junior ranks. It is normal for us to recruit between 34 to 45% Black employees at entry level. However, it is essential for us to address the poor representation at mid and senior levels. Our vision is for Mediacom to become the most inclusive and diverse agency, and in order to achieve this, we need to be bold with our approach. We recognise that we need to interrupt the system in order to develop our diverse talent and drive our representation across our business and ensure that we are able to make systemic change. So, in September last year, we launched a sponsorship programme for people of colour, because it's important that we acknowledge that not everyone at Mediacom comes to Mediacom with the same experience and resources. If, for example, you're an Asian woman who comes from a very traditional background and working in this industry is not your family norm, or if you are a young Black man with no connections in this industry and you are often the only Black person in the room, factors like these can impact on your sense of self-belief, your confidence to negotiate, and your sense of empowerment. This is hard to understand if you are someone who is white and middle class and have always felt that you belong and that you have the right to a voice. We at Mediacom are comfortable with the concept of equity rather than equality. We want to ensure all of our people have the chance to succeed and that they aren't held back by who they are or who they do or do not know. And so we focus on equitable opportunities and programmes so that all are able to flourish and progress. You may be wondering how sponsorship differs from mentorship. We feel really strongly about sponsorship and its need to be a minimum standard. Mentorship is a valuable relationship, it is a really valuable relationship, but it can be a formal or informal relationship with an advisor or peer who acts as a role model. The mentor provides personal advice and support, but there is no more at stake at the end than the time that they've invested. Once the mentor relationship is finished, that person is still left in the same system and with the same challenges and barriers around them. Sponsorship, however, is much more action orientated. It is about addressing those challenges and barriers head on. It requires those in positions of authority within the same company to use their power of influence intentionally to help their protege advance. While a mentor is someone who has knowledge and will share it with you, a sponsor is a person who has power and will use it for you. A mentor might ask the question, how can I guide and develop? Whereas a sponsor might ask, how can I guide and develop, but also unlock opportunities and then advocate for this person? A sponsor's role is to understand their sponsees' career aspirations, values and potential, and then intervene. The sponsor will create tangible opportunities for the development and progression of their sponsee. And by that, we mean things like helping them to build brilliant client relationship skills, or unlocking access to different types of projects, or getting them onto a pitch team when they've never had new business experience before. Or it might be that they're helping them to build their network and profile. They will help them with their self-limiting beliefs and will advocate them in rooms that they are not yet in. It is important for the sponsors in the programme to be in senior positions within the business. So all of our ExCo and managing partners at Mediacom are sponsors. It is vital that they're within the same company so that they have the influence to unlock opportunity and help to fill experience gaps and access more advanced knowledge. It is also important that the chosen sponsees on the programme are clear about their career aspirations and work-life blend so that the sponsor can effectively help them to reach their goals. They need to be open-minded and willing to push and challenge themselves. And I can attest to myself being on the sponsorship programme that you have to really be open-minded, and I'm really excited to be pushing and challenging myself to move on. Often at D&I events, people talk about diversity and they go straight to the entry-level talent piece because it's the easiest place to start. People talk less about how we keep the people we already have. And for us, this is a core lever to ensure we retain the talent and continue to challenge those industry stats that I mentioned earlier. When I look around this industry, I rarely see myself reflected, and sponsorship rather than mentorship is really how we are going to rectify that. And because networking and being reflected is so vital, we have joined together with other WPP agencies to create a sponsorship community. The community has provided opportunity for all sponsees to share their experience, discuss previous barriers, and for them to build their network with peers outside of Mediacom. But it isn't just about building your own professional network, it is also about sharing your story, seeing your background represented, and feeling less alone on your journey. Whilst at work, we know that Black and Asian people can often experience things that are unfortunately unacceptable, and the community allows sponsees to hear from others stories that may be familiar. It is an opportunity to share some of that internal dialogue or experiences that have shaped our identities and self-belief, and which in turn affects our career paths and progression. Sponsorship isn't just for the people being sponsored. We hope to be in a position where we have stronger talent pipelines because of our really intentional approach. We would just know more people, we would have more people developing at a good rate, and ultimately this is about us breaking down silos and helping us to deliver better work. So we at Mediacom are 5 months into our sponsorship programme, and we'll be measuring its success with regular check-ins with both the sponsors and sponsees. We'll be mapping the sponsees into roles so that we can convert these development opportunities, and we have targets for better representation in the more senior roles. We are in the early days, but this really tangible and action-focused approach is getting good feedback so far, and it's forging new and better relationships, and we are continuing to hold ourselves to account. The whole idea of the programme is to really improve employer experience, and we can already see this happening. And I'm going to leave you with a few words from one of our sponsees. Having a programme that is trying to help and further the careers of ethnic minority members is so important for businesses. We all want to see more Black and Asian members in senior leadership positions at our company, And this can only happen through company-led initiatives that ensure we're given clear pathways and guidance for success. I've never had a mentor figure before, and I can honestly say that it has really improved my overall well-being and feelings to work, especially during these trying times. It has been so beneficial to have a senior member of the company to speak to about my career and progression. Having someone that is not directly on your team or business unit allows them to give you unbiased feedback and sponsorship, which is truly invaluable. That's it from me. I'll hand back to Nancy. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Av. I'm going to make a little plea, actually, while I've got a room full of people. If anyone else feels like putting a sponsorship programme in place at your organisation, one of the things we'd love to achieve with that sponsee community is to have that outside of Mediacom, outside of WPP agencies. I think there is such an amazing benefit to bringing people together from lots of different organisations so that we can really enhance that network. So if anyone has a programme, if anyone's putting it in place, then please connect with us, because it'd be amazing to strengthen that community. So I'm super conscious of time, and I can see the questions racking up. So I'm going to introduce Claire Ferguson now, our head of comms, who is going to facilitate this section.
Hi everybody, thank you for joining us today. Thank you so much to all the speakers. I have been furiously scribbling notes, so I've taken a lot from that already. And I can see from the questions here that there's lots of people that have put questions up, and also people that have liked questions. So carry on putting your questions in. We'll get through as many as we can. We have a hard stop at 1 o'clock, and for anybody that we can't answer your question, we will come back with a follow-up after this session. So please don't worry if your question doesn't get addressed. Now, if it's okay, I'd love to go to Kate first. I'm probably going to try and group these questions in order of your appearance, roughly, guys, speakers, if that's okay. And I'll try and group them together as well. So we'll ask you a few at a time. So Kate, there's been a question here that has come through regarding the dual and simultaneous equal focus on diversity and inclusion. And the question is specifically, what role does equity play in your D&I strategy from a Mediacom perspective?
Yeah, so it plays a really big role. So I think what Av has just been talking through is really right in this space. So, you know, we absolutely believe that not everybody comes to Mediacom, and that they don't all start from the same place. So I think that some groups need to have more focus in terms of building confidence and feeling that they are able to step into a promotion or, you know, make more progress. So I think the sponsorship program for me is a brilliant example of where we are trying to create equity for all of our employees. I'm a sponsor myself. I spent a lot of time with my sponsee. I get so much out of those sessions. I really hope she does too. But I think the sponsorship program is all about trying to create equity for everybody. I think one of the other things that I was really keen to do, also in recognition of the fact that some groups just don't have equity. They're not, you know, they don't come with all the confidence, the private education, the, you know, all of that stuff. So I wanted to do an accelerator program, which is, I think, where we really did quite a lot of work with Lydia, which was brilliant. I know that Lydia was a huge inspiration to a lot of our Black, Asian and minority ethnic talent on that program. But again, we put that accelerator program in place in recognition that not everybody has equity.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you for your answer there. And there's a question here, Kate, whilst I've got you, which is about the microaggressions approach, so the video that you played at the beginning of your talk earlier on. It says, I think the microaggressions approach is very brave. What difference has it made to your culture? So obviously we introduced that last summer, so it's had some time to sort of bed in. I think the question is, what difference or what sort of shift are we seeing as an agency?
So, well, I hope that, I mean, I hear anecdotally that it's been a very powerful thing, but we are absolutely tracking it. So we have the WPP Belonging Survey, which is a survey that really gives us an understanding of how our people across all groups are feeling, how connected they feel to Mediacom, how much they belong. And so we have a hard metric. So our first round of that survey was in April last year. We're doing it again this year. So I would hope to see an improvement in belonging scores, particularly in underrepresented groups. So we are absolutely tracking our progress on this. But really, you know, I hope it's having an impact. I hear that it is, but I think these things are not changed overnight. I think they're quite hard to shift, a lot of these metrics, and we're already in quite a strong position from an inclusion perspective in the belonging survey. So all progress will be celebrated.
Cool, thank you, Kate. Just while I've got you, there's another question on microaggressions, which is to do with junior employees. I think it probably relates to some of what Avalon was talking about from a sponsorship perspective. The question is it's from Hannah, so thank you, Hannah, for posting this question. I love your work on microaggressions. How do you empower junior employees to be good allies, especially if microaggressions are coming from a more senior colleague?
Yeah. It's a really good question. I mean, this is why we've done the microaggressions training. And what we did deliberately on those workshops, which is kind of the beauty of the Zoom world in which we live, is that we deliberately did a spread of seniority on those sessions. So we had really junior people all the way up to senior people. And I think certainly the session I was in, I could literally hear pennies dropping. Because I think there are a lot of people who've never experienced a microaggression. They have said things that they don't really think has even caused offence. And I think it was really important for our junior people on those calls to hear senior people talking openly. I think the allyship training that we provided for everybody was there to equip all of our people, not just junior, but all of our people with some of the resources and skills to call this stuff out. It's not easy to call out a microaggression when you see or hear it. So the allyship training, which isn't one thing, I mean, we've got to keep doing that, is a way that we can continue to empower junior people to call things out, and also to know that in our culture we don't tolerate microaggressions. But I mean, I think the senior point is a really interesting one, and what we're doing is and Nancy might want to step in and just talk about this, we're going to do some training at a more senior level this year to really get into this difficult area with our leaders, to make sure that, you know, they are not allowing bad behaviour or microaggressions to go unchecked. Yeah. So that, I think, will really help people through the business to feel more supported, because I think what we'll see is more role modelling from our senior people.
Thank you, Kate. That's really clear. I'm going to move to Lydia now, if that's okay. So Lydia, there were a couple of posts here, questions I think are relevant to you. One of them is specific to your point, the big point that you made about honesty. So it is asking about, and I think that was a really poignant point that you made, which is kind of really having the bravery to look honestly at the organisation that you work in, and maybe listening to some of the stuff that you don't want to hear sometimes. And the question is, do you have any techniques, hints and tips when it comes to honestly analysing your culture? Thanks, Lydia.
Yeah, I mean, that's a real big question right there. In honesty, I feel, and starting with in honesty, for any organisation to invite to do their own survey, or invite an organisation to come in, an expert to come and deliver the survey, it's about, when you've made that decision, to be prepared to hear something that you're not willing to hear. So be prepared to hear the unacceptable. Because you're not really enrolling somebody in to tell you great things. But you'll hear some great things, of course, but you're here to find out what the problem is, and then from that problem you create inclusive solutions. And I think the environments have to be really set up for, say, for example, for somebody like myself to be able to walk into a room and say, not specifically saying who, that it's been reported, or, you know, there's some findings on this. And for the person that's in receipt, or the organisation that's hearing this, to take it and say, isn't it great that we're understanding the real core problem that's happening within our business right now? And isn't it great that we can now find a way to move past this rather than walk away, ignore, shy away from those difficult conversations? Because I want to go in truly and help those organisations turn that around. And also I care for the individuals or groups of people within the business that are having a really difficult journey. So on behalf of the business and behalf of the employees, it's really important for me to be set up for success, for your success, and to be able to tell you the truth, and for you to expect actually to feel triggered by the information. And then once you realise, look, I'm being triggered, that's fine, be willing. And if you stay in that space where you're feeling triggered, there's a payoff for doing that. It means that in a way you're staying safe and you don't really have to make that all important decision to make that change to move forward. So my top tips are to be prepared to feel triggered, set up your consultants to feel confident, secure and safe to deliver that information to you. Because once you take a seat back and you listen and take a view, then you believe me, you can then begin to move forward. So I hope that's helped.
Thank you, Lydia. That was great. And there was another point that was more of a comment, really, based on what you talked about earlier, which is about honesty being important. And the person has said, thank you for making that clear. It's common to try and ignore what we don't want to hear, which you're obviously talking about there. And I think it's interesting to sort of the fact that you're sort of talking about making sure that the conditions are right to be able to be able to take that information on. So thank you. I'm going to. Sorry, did you have anything to add to that point, Lydia?
No, thank you very much. I just wanted to wrap up and say it's so. I know I've kept on speaking about the culture, and I've heard so many different people speak today about culture and understanding those lived experiences. And it is really good that we're all here sharing everything. But it's a lifelong journey. What we're doing here. So it's not just for 2021 that we do it and then next year we move on to something different. As long as you've got business and as long as you want productivity and profitability as well, because we are a business and we do need to make we definitely need to generate an income. Just make sure that you're paying attention to those. And when those policies that are being created, please include the people that you're referring to within your policies, because there's no point handing those policies over, because after all that work, and policies take time and money, I know this from creating the Stop It protocol. If you're interested, please reach out to us today at hello@lydiaamoir.com. Happy for you to have a copy of that policy, but even more so, learn how to put into action. That's it. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Lydia. Thank you so much. I'm going to come to Debbie now, if that's okay, Debbie. There's been a few questions based on the video and the approach that you talked about from a Sky perspective, the targets that you've been setting. And some of them actually come on to reference inclusive recruitment, which you didn't get the chance to sort of talk about. So I think it would be good to use some time to talk about that now. The first point was just basically people saying they're really impressed with the level of sophistication used to model targets at Sky. Video being a very simple and engaging way of bringing to life why the targets are important. But the specific first question is around how organisations can implement inclusive policies in the hiring process without making the candidate feel as though they've only progressed because it means the organisation hits a quota. So I think that's the first question. Thanks, Debbie.
Yeah, so thanks for the question. The first thing I wanted to address, it's a language point, which is about targets versus quotas, actually. So quotas are external, they're mandated by an external organisation and sort of imposed on a business or company, and targets are set internally and they're voluntary and then at the organisation's discretion. So we've been quite deliberate about, they're not quotas. So just to say that, because it's been a point of discussion. So I think it's about transparency. I think the approach we've taken and we continue to take is to be really transparent about this is why the diversity and inclusion initiatives matter to us. These are the 4 pillars of our strategy. This is how it applies to how we recruit, retain and progress people. And that when we're hiring people, we tell them that. That doesn't mean that that they're being hired because of their ethnicity or any characteristics, it is because it's on merit. And so, as I said earlier, we've been very clear with our leaders who are doing most of the recruiting that the behaviours and the culture that goes alongside achieving our targets is as important. So the way we've approached it is making sure that we always have diverse shortlists, that we have a diverse recruitment approach, that the interview pool, the people who are doing the interviewing, and there's a very practical point, which is because we don't have enough Black and ethnic minority colleagues in the leadership position, we're actually trialling something, we have trialed and it's been successful, something new, which is observers within interviews. So people are actually sitting in on interviews and making sure that interview is conducted, they're not marking anyone's homework, but just making sure that the experience of all candidates is equal. And I think being transparent with candidates, this is the way that we approach it, but being really clear and consistent that it will always be about merit. So, I would be the first person to say, if you've got two candidates and they're, they have, one is white, one is Black, and the white person is, definitely the better candidate, you should not give someone the job because they're Black or ethnic minority. And I know from speaking to Black and ethnic minority colleagues, that is their worst fear, that they will get the job because of that. People will think that. So we've had very open discussions about that, and reassured people that's not the case, because the best thing for the business is to hire the best person for the job. The trick is in making sure that we open the pool wide enough so that we have enough people and we are leveling the playing field at the shortlist stage. That is what it's about, making sure you have enough great candidates from diverse backgrounds so you're giving yourself the best possible chance of hiring one of those people.
Brilliant, thank you, Debbie. That's really clear. There's another question that's come through for you, Debbie, which is regarding when you were talking earlier, you mentioned the fact that Sky don't use the BAME language anymore. There's obviously been a reasonable amount written about this in terms of press coverage as well over the last year. But the question is from Rachel, so thank you, Rachel, for posting the question. And this person is just interested to understand why you don't use that language anymore.
Yeah, again, I think that's a great question we've had again. Language matters, and so we've had a discussion about how we communicate and what that says. And the inclusive language guide, which we've produced alongside the inclusive recruitment guide, what we say is try and avoid using acronyms when referring to a specific ethnic group. So, if you have an Excel spreadsheet and you're looking at different cohorts and you're talking about a data point, then it might say Black, Asian, minority, ethnic at the top. We try and make sure people actually say that in full. But what we heard loud and clear from our colleagues is, I am not a BAME person. I'm a South Asian person. I'm a Black person. And so if there's no alternative but to use a catch-all term, then we prefer that people use the term ethnic minorities or diverse ethnic communities, which also can include white minorities, by the way. If someone has to use that, we say Black, Asian, minority, ethnic, spelling it out. We always capitalize the letters for ethnic groups in order to do that because of the feedback that we've had. Alongside that, by the way, we've got various other sort of guidance around outdated terms and making presumptions and gender neutrality and all of that. The using BAME or not has enlisted probably the most debate, but where we've come out is on the side of not using it wherever possible, and if we do, spelling out what we mean by it.
Okay, great, thank you, Debbie. There's another question before I let you go, Debbie, which is about class unfairness. So it's from Simon. So thank you, Simon, for putting this question up. It says, Debbie, the UK has a profound issue with class unfairness in terms of access and a class pay gap. And this is even more pronounced for women and some ethnic groups. Does Sky have targets for social backgrounds?
So I think it's a really interesting question, and it's definitely a hot topic, particularly with the government levelling up agenda. So I think we're going to sort of hear more about that. I've not seen anyone do this yet. Someone might be doing it that I'm not aware of. I think the reason is because of data. So it's, we don't have social class data on all of our people. The government doesn't collect social class data on all people. I think the only way you could do it is, potentially you could use regions as a proxy, perhaps. So you could look at region by region or local community by local community. But essentially our targets are based on the data that people give us by their self-declaration of their of their identifying characteristics, obviously protected data, and we aggregate it all, and we simply don't have that data. So it'd be sort of impossible. I think what you can do is you can set an intent to say, we want to make sure that, particularly when we're bringing people into the organisation, particularly in the early careers, that we are being a lot broader. And we've already said that, and we are, we're doing that in various ways by expanding our apprenticeship programme, etc. But I don't think there'd be a way of necessarily collecting and publishing that data today. And ours has been a very deliberately data-based approach.
Okay. Thank you, Debbie. There's just one more question, which is just really for you, which is about how your people feel about the targets. So are your employees to whom these targets don't apply to invested and happy about the targets? So how has this gone down, I guess, at Sky culturally?
Yeah, look, I think really well. I think everyone understands that, we made the commitments last summer very publicly, very deliberately. We've, made a significant financial commitment over 3 years, and that we're very serious about this, and that we feel it's the right thing for us to do, as I said, as a business which has the reach and the voice that we do. So I think most people at Sky get that. The vast majority, really positive feedback. I've obviously been very close to what people are saying on our employee platforms. We have our intranet, we have Yammer, and really well received. I think it also comes off the back of, we launched them in January because we'd been listening and talking and learning, probably for 6 months. A lot of conversation across the organisation about what was the right thing to do, and we'd shared that strategy, of which representation was a key pillar, and we'd already signalled that this is coming. So really positive amongst our leaders, and our people take their cues from the leaders. People have really embraced this. People have been really honest about the fact that this is a marathon, not a sprint. That's why our target date is 2025, because if we'd have said we're going to achieve this by 2023, when you do the maths, it's actually impossible unless you say, we're just going to get rid of a whole load of white people, which obviously we're not going to do. And so there's because it's illegal, there's definitely been a journey that people have been on the last 6 months, and I think incredibly positive, because they're hearing from their Black and minority ethnic colleagues that this really matters, and they've taken them on the journey of awareness as well. So I'm really pleased with the response. It's been absolutely terrific.
Great, thank you, Debbie. I've got a question here for Avalon, which is about the explanation of sponsorship versus mentorship. I think Lydia has also touched on this as well, but essentially the question is, how do you recommend setting up programmes in other sectors and organisations that are like this? Because I think a lot of people, often there can be some confusion around these two terms, and it's back to Debbie's point earlier, probably about clarity of language.
Yeah, I think it is about ensuring that you have the right level of seniority as your sponsors in the business, whatever your industry is. So like I mentioned earlier, for us it's all of our ExCo and MPs. It's really important that we recognise the difference of sponsorship and mentorship. So that sponsorship is really about driving our people of colour through the business. So those sponsors need to have the right level of privilege and power to be able to do that. So that would be the first thing. And in order to kind of assess who you want to be your sponsors, again, we reached out to our managing partners and to get feedback on who those people should be. It's about us driving forward and making actionable change actually happen. It's our 18-month programme. So sorry, we ensured that those people of colour are high performers, high potential, who really understood what they wanted from their career journey, and those sponsors then helped move them, will be able to help move them forward.
Great, thank you, Av, thank you for that. So I just have a couple of questions left. I was wondering whether I could actually just talk to Nancy about these, if that's okay, Nancy, because there was just a couple of questions about the microaggressions training. There's a question that's come through that's from Rachel, that says, how do you decide on a focus that microaggressions and allyship were important areas of focus for your D&I journey? So I guess the question really is, what data did you use to inform that specifically?
So a couple of sources of data, and tipping into what Lydia was talking about earlier, we chose to get really up close and personal with people in different marginalised groups to understand this better. So we do something periodically at MediaCom called Candid Conversations, which is essentially a cultural listening project. So we reach out to people in different communities, in quite a wide range of different communities, to understand what their experience is like, not just in MediaCom, but just generally. And I think, you know, when we first did that, we started to understand that microaggressions were happening to people in our organisation, in their personal lives, you know, in previous employers. And there is when you start to really listen to the stories behind that, you see what harm that does to people and what baggage that they are bringing with them into different organisations. So it really started to feel like this is not something that we can ignore, because those human stories are very, very difficult to listen to. We also were struck by, in that process, I personally only interviewed one person who could give me a good example of allyship that happened to them. Even in their personal lives, people were saying that people don't step in, people turn around and watch because it's almost interesting for them to see what happens, or they feel really awkward and they don't know what to do. So that was quite distressing to hear that we aren't stepping in and doing anything in any sort of facet of our lives. So we just felt like these human stories they're important and they're having an impact. We then, as Kate said earlier, we did our belonging survey, which then gave us the numbers that backed up those human stories. And we started to see there was a real disparity when we asked questions about appropriate behaviour and inappropriate behaviour, more importantly. We started to see that there are big gaps between what straight white men are reporting and what people in other groups are telling us. So those who have a disability, black women, black men, people of the Muslim faith, sometimes they are recording scores that are 20, 30, 40% different to that of white men. And so immediately when you have that qual and quant data, that told us that was something that we had to really get into. And our philosophy, I think broadly, someone's asked a question about unconscious bias, which I'm not a huge fan of. Our philosophy is to do the trickier conversations and to do that hard work, because we just can't ignore that. I think, you know, society has done a really good job at ignoring the difficult stuff and taking the route that is most comfortable for majority groups, and we are where we are. So yeah. we are trying to do the stuff that frankly is a little riskier, a little bit more uncomfortable, but if we don't, I just don't think we're going to move forward.
Thank you, Nancy. That's a very honest answer. I really appreciate your time there. And thank you all panelists for answering all these questions. There's a few questions we haven't answered. We will come back to you individually, but there will be a follow-up after this session as well. And I'd just like to pass over to Nancy, if that's okay, just for a quick close, if everyone's got a couple of minutes. And I realise that Debbie and Lydia, if you need to drop off, please feel free to. And thank you so much for taking part today.
Thank you, guys. That was great talks, and also thank you, Claire, for helping there. So look, I just wanted to wrap up for a minute or two. I'm really conscious that we are on time now, so I won't take long. You know, we've heard about different areas today. So we heard in slightly different ways from Kate and Lydia about doing that hard work, understanding what people's lived experience is, facing into those truths that actually might make us feel a bit ashamed, make us feel really guilty, make us feel really worried and nervous. But I think that's the time for that stuff is now, right? 2020, if it taught us nothing else, it taught us that we have to do that. And so it was great to hear both their perspectives on those difficult conversations. If we assume that we understand things just because we're in leadership positions, we're pretty much going to be wrong on those. So we have to talk to the communities involved. We heard from Debbie, let's treat this like we do every other business area. We just can't. I find it very frustrating when I see organisations tiptoeing around diversity and inclusion. I don't know why we do that. I know it's because it's uncomfortable, but it means that the results aren't going to be there. So, Sky have done brilliant work in being incredibly tangible about that and really holding themselves to account publicly, which I think is amazing. And obviously Ab talked to us about that sponsorship programme, and she referenced a point that I think is really important. When we talk about diversity inclusion, we so often start talking about, well, let's look at entry-level talent, let's look at grads, let's look at school leavers. we can't just do that. It is part of the solution, but it is not the solution. We have to make sure our environments are inclusive so that when we bring those people in, they don't churn automatically. But we also have to look at the people that we already have. And I think that there are people in our organisations who sometimes feel a bit forgotten, and as though we just start looking everywhere else bar them to find the solution. And actually quite often we have those people in our organisations already. So how do we move them along? How do we make sure they progress? How do we make sure they want to stay in our businesses? So they're the topics we touched on today. We could go for hours on this, and as I referenced earlier, I would love it if we could have more sessions like this. I think if people are interested in that, it would be great to hear what topics you would like to touch on in the future, and we can bring together speakers and information of our own that will help us address that. So it'd be great to get your feedback. And as I said earlier, if you heard something today where you think that's an issue we have, let's all start reaching out to each other. Let's work on things together, and I think we'll get to a better place. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much to the speakers, and hopefully we'll see you in a session in the future. Thanks very much.
Thank you.